It's been a while since we first came across Chinese Oppo's Find 5, the company's first flagship that really put the otherwise obscure manufacturer on the map. But time has gone by and here we are with the Find series successor in the Find 7A. In fact, Oppo will soon have two almost identical flagships up for grabs, the Find 7 which still hasn't come out and the Find 7A that we have at hand. At $499, the Find 7A is the more affordable version, but also the slightly less powerful one. It's got a typical 1080p resolution display and it makes use of slightly less potent components in the processor, memory and battery departments. Yet, despite its inferiority to its sibling, the Find 7A is every bit a desirable and current flagship. But is it more desirable than what the competition has to offer? Disagrees with Phone Arena, bear with me in order to find out. If nothing else, Oppo has always struck us as a company that is very conscious of design down to the finer details. With the Find 7A, the company reinforces that feeling. We have clear-cut lines and an overall simplistic design that certainly appeals to the eye. Frankly, and despite failing to mount a challenge against aluminum-clad phones like the HTC One, the Find 7A definitely begs no question. Its high-end beginnings are obvious even to passers-by. So what material then is responsible for the corpus of the 7A? Unsurprisingly, it's made of polycarbonate, though the chrome ornament seen with the frame, the buttons on the side and even the camera ring do add to the overall beautiful and sturdy construction of the phone. The plastic rare shell has an intricate mesh texture which helps with the grip. Overall ergonomics are also pretty decent considering the size of the phone. At the front you have medium-sized bezels with a set of capacitive navigation keys and an inconspicuous rainbow-shaped LED notification light on the bottom. Looking at the 7A sideways, we have the power button on the left, while the volume rocker took to the right side of the frame. Unfortunately, these are rather flush with the surface and offer minimal travel. Oppo has chosen one of JDI's display for the Find 7A, a 5.5-inch IPS panel with a resolution of 1080 by 920 pixels. This ensures a crisp viewing experience, but a trained eye will quickly notice discrepancies in some areas. For example, the display on the 7A at 9531 kelvins is very cold, so whites are not white at all and even differing shades of grey are bluish. Due to the suboptimal gamma, colors rendered by the screen are also less luminant than the actual target colors. Nevertheless, it's imperative to understand that these discrepancies are not actually extreme and the Find 7A screen is actually nice looking overall. However, the screen's otherwise decent maximum brightness of 455 nits actually doesn't mean much when outdoors with the sun shining over your shoulder. In those scenarios, the glass on top proves too reflective, so making out the UI was hard. Powering the Find 7A software-wise is Oppo's Color OS on top of Android 4.3 Jelly Bean. We felt like Color OS strikes a fine balance between offering extra functionality and keeping things simple and accessible. On the whole, the software differentiates itself from your average Android handset in three main ways. For one, and considering the size of the device, we're definitely happy to see that Oppo is joining up with manufacturers like LG by offering double tap to wake type functionality on the 7A. We also dig Oppo's inclusion of gestures. Two of those come by default and can be drawn directly on the screen when it's locked. There's a shortcut for the camera, for example, if you draw a 0, and one for the flashlight if you draw a V. You can also create your own gestures and define their behavior, but these won't work if the screen is off. Instead, you have to swipe the top left side of the status bar to open the so-called gesture panel, which kind of defeats the idea of quick access. The third and last more interesting feature of the 7A is its access to the very extensive treasure troves of themes available right through a built-in app. You can change the look and style of both your home and lock screens, so for example, you can easily transform the Find 7A to look alike to stock Android. Essential apps like the dialer, contacts, the calendar and messages and email all have seen intervention from Oppo, but we again like their simplistic down to the point but modern look and standard functioning. Of course, Oppo hasn't missed the opportunity to add some extra apps. For example, we found that the built-in guest mode is one of the better implementations of the functionality. You essentially get two unlock patterns working simultaneously, one for you and one for your children. In the same vein, we found the preloaded app encryption handy. It essentially allows you to lock certain apps like the gallery, for example, where you may have sensitive content. Last but not least, the permission monitor app allows you to keep track of which apps are making use of what kind of data and functionality on your phone. What's more, you can deny certain privileges on a per app basis. The Oppo Find 7A finished in the top 5 of our best performance when it came to synthetic benchmarks, and that's not surprising in the slightest. Packing a monstrous 2.3 GHz quad-core Snapdragon 801 chip and 2 GB of RAM, neither apps nor games can manage the feat of pressuring the silicon inside. The Find 7A powers through everything, from the basics like navigating around the UI through heavy gaming titles almost with a smirk. As for storage, you'll find 16GB on board the 7A, but you do have the option to expand through a microSD card. With such a beastly processor ticking underneath the fine 7A's exterior, it should be no surprise to hear that browsing on Oppo's new device is a breeze. The phone loads even heavier pages quickly, and navigating even full-sized websites is easy thanks to the responsive nature of Chrome. As can be expected, the 7A also offers a sizable cache of connectivity options. There's Bluetooth 4.0, NFC, 5GHz Wi-Fi and assisted GPS, along with FDD LTE with support for bands 1, 3, 7 and 20. As soon as we managed to unbox the Find 7A, we went outside straight away with the idea of putting the 13MP rear camera through its paces. The camera on the 7A comes with a wider than average f2.0 aperture, a dual LED flash config and an average size sensor. Looking at the software first, we definitely appreciate the simplistic nature of the camera UI, which is ergonomically spaced out. This is not the most functional camera of all, but it has a few notable tricks up its sleeve. Namely, you get the usual shooting modes like panorama and HDR, but also extras such as low shutter speed, which is great for working out artsy looking night shots, HD picture, which creates massive 50MP snaps, and lastly, a RAW mode, which outputs shots in a DNG format for easy post-processing. Now, HD picture surely caught your attention, so let's talk about it first. The way it works is very simple. You point towards your object, click the shutter button, and then wait for about 5 seconds for the snap to be processed. And just like that, you get a 50MP image with greater detail. So what's going on here? Well, the Find 7A takes 10 normal 13MP snaps and then stitches them together and interpolates the resulting stills. The results are not always exemplary and errors do happen, still the detail improvement is really pretty significant when compared to the usual stills mode. You will probably end up not using this mode for every picture as it's very slow, but it is also handy when you want to take a pretty high definition photo. Speaking of usual stills, Oppo has learned from its past mistakes, and the software has been tweaked to judge different scenarios much better. For one, exposure is consistently set properly and photos are realistically bright or dark. Moreover, colors are pleasant looking but also correct at the same time, and digital noise is kept at check with great success. Fine detail, even when looking at 100% crops, is discernible, so we're definitely liking what we're seeing here on the whole. In fact, the sensor on the 7A proved itself capable even in low light scenarios, including in complete darkness where the powerful dual LEDs illuminate the scene very well. Unlike many competing flagship cameras, the one we have here doesn't produce palpably cold results, and that's a considerable plus even though fine details is kind of lacking at times. Shutter speed does go down considerably though, so sudden movements may cause blur. Lastly, and before we move on to video capture, we've got to know that the Find 7A's 5MP front-facing cam also produces some pretty sharp results. Alright, so video capture. Like any self-respecting flagship, in addition to the now baseline 1080p resolution clips, Find 7A can also shoot 4K video along with 720p slow-mos. There's also an HDR video mode, though that one isn't worth your time. You trade a significant chunk of quality for a more dynamic clip and it's just not worth it. The rest, however, all produce very acceptable clips with sufficiently high frame rates at all times and an abundance of detail. In charge of your multimedia needs are proprietary Oppo apps such as music and video players, both of which are exceedingly simplistic in nature. In all honesty, they remind of a better looking versions of the usual stock Android representatives, and many will probably like that. Obviously, watching clips off YouTube or even the occasional TV show is not actually an exercise in futility thanks to that large and crisp display and powerful speakers on the back. As for the gallery, the same kind of deal applies here. It's also relatively basic but not as bare as the rest. For example, you have features like a built-in collage editor which quickly stitches together several snaps of your choosing together. Both the microphone and the in-ear speaker on the Oppo Find 7A proved most capable in our testing. For its part, the microphone transmitted our voices pleasantly for the other side, with minimal distortions which were only noticeable when we raised our voice. That wasn't needed, however, as the other side was hearing us very loud already. As for the in-ear speaker, it's also top-notch. Voices timbres were properly carried out over the other side, and you and your caller will both know who's on the other end instantaneously. Keeping the lights on is a 2800 mAh battery which offers over a day of heavy usage. Unfortunately, the Find 7A doesn't quite handle prolonged standby periods as well as some others and drops about 10 to 15% charge during the night. Thankfully, this issue is offset by the inclusion of what Oppo is calling the Rapid Charger. The Rapid Charger is a larger than average wall charger which outputs 4.5 amperes of current and is able to very rapidly charge the battery. From our own testing, the Find 7A gained 1% of charge every 30 seconds. In fact, in one instance we managed to replenish the whopping 56% of charge in just 23 minutes, which is really impressive. So in conclusion, the Find 7a truly has it all: an attractive and ergonomic body, massive performance muscle, and a worthy flagship camera. Best of all, it comes carrying the comparatively affordable price tag of $499 unlocked. That's a significant discount when compared with flagship phablets like the Note 3, which goes for about $699, or even the giant HTC Max, which goes for cheaper at $499. As importantly, the Find 7a isn't just a spectator and actually manages to successfully spar with the big boys. Even the all-new Galaxy S5, which sells for about $649, is not out of its league, though it does come with a better camera and beastly battery longevity. The HTC M8 is also notably more expensive at $639, but comes packing a full-blown aluminum unibody and a set of front-facing speakers to be reckoned with. In any case, the Find 7a is very likely Oppo's greatest achievement to date, and one that we definitely think deserves a spot on the world stage. This was Chris with Phone Arena, until next time.